Today, I'm talking about the shifts and changes that are happening within the so-called New Age and spiritual communities. Welcome back to another video. I'm excited to dive into this conversation today because this was actually inspired by a comment that I received from one of my audience members. It was a comment on a recent video, and it was such a great question. What this comment said is, any ideas why there are so many New Age to Jesus testimonies out there right now? It's extremely confusing to me. It'd mean that any channeling is off the table in cards and stuff like that. The testimonies are very genuine, so it's hard to disregard. And basically, for those of you who maybe are unfamiliar or not sure what this is referring to, it's basically talking about just different experiences that people have shared around going from the so-called New Age, which is a huge vast world, in my opinion, of different ways of thinking about spirituality that kind of moves away from religion and the more traditional spiritual religious ways of thinking about and connecting with the divine, and moving out of that New Age world back to more traditional religious ways of connecting, and maybe leaning more towards Christianity or the Catholic religion, or other ways. I'm not too specific on that, but it's basically a transition back to the Bible, you could say. And I want to, first of all, just also say that I feel like I want this video to be just an open discussion. I want to hear what you guys think about this, what your experience has been with this. I'm going to share my personal experiences and also my personal beliefs and opinions around this based on my experiences. So this in no mean is like a way to say this is what the right answer is. It's more so just I've been there, I've experienced it, I've questioned things. And so I want to share about that and my journey through that and the conclusions that I've come to based on that. And like I said, I want this to be an open discussion. So I want to encourage you to share in the comments below what your experience has been, what your opinion is, like things like that. But to first of all, kind of go into this, I was first, I guess, exposed to this or witnessed this happening with Doreen Virtue. So many of you probably know who she is. If you don't, she was a very prominent thought leader and spiritual teacher talking about angels. I do believe that Doreen Virtue really led the way and kind of created a huge pathway for people to connect with angels and learn about angels and understand angels. And so she created a whole bunch of card decks. She wrote a whole bunch of books. She was published by Hay House. She did talks, taught courses. Like, she talked about fairies too, and a whole bunch of things. Like, she was all in that world of like angels and fairies and connecting with them and channeling with them and using card decks and all that. And I think it was sometime around the beginning of 2019, I believe, when she basically like denounced everything. She was just like, I have had a, coming to Jesus moment. And she basically said like all of these things are wrong and I was led down the wrong path. And, everything that she created, she was like, card decks are bad and meditation is bad and manifesting is bad and this is bad and yoga and like all these things that she was just like denouncing and saying like, this is not okay. And I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know the details of her journey. I just know that she went from being this like angel teacher and sharing about all the things to like just complete 180. And I'm not sure exactly if she specifically talks about the Bible or like what specific religious stream she went down, but I know that she kind of like switched to that and was talking about, we should only be calling on Jesus and anything else is bad and whatever. So that was the first time. So I believe that was beginning of 2019. That was the first time that I saw that happening. And at that time I'd already been doing my business for about 2 years, so I was like very much in the world of everything that I do and being like, whoa, that's interesting that happened. And just like witnessing that and being like, huh, interesting that she would say that. Like, that's really weird. Yoga helps a lot of people. Meditation has helped so many people. So the fact that she was denouncing all these things, I was just kind of like, okay, like, I don't know what to think about this, but you do you. And then a more personal experience for me happened throughout, I'd say, end of 2022 and into 2023, like kind of through that year of 2023, where I had an experience where someone that I personally was, mentored by, someone that I was following online, someone whose teachings it was around business and just kind of like leadership and things like that I really valued, she started to transition from kind of like the more universal spiritual stuff to, again, more of like this Bible religious, following, and talking more about that in that perspective, and kind of sharing how her own spiritual journey has led her to the scriptures and things like that. And also in some ways later on, not so loudly, but like subtly denouncing things like using oracle card decks and, connecting with anything other than God and Jesus and things like that. And so because I had been mentored by her previously, like I was in one of her masterminds. I attended one of her retreats. Like, she was someone that I really looked up to, and I still respect her and think that she's doing great things. But because I was like so invested in what she was teaching and things like that, there was definitely a part of me that was like, oh my gosh, am I doing something wrong? Like in my business and in my work, like she's teaching about these things and a lot of stuff that she's saying does make sense. And is that something that I need to like take into consideration and whatever? So I went on this whole journey, and I've shared this in different places before about how I went through, and then on top of that I had a newborn baby. So I was just going through the whole identity crisis of having a second kid, and just like in the postpartum energy and just in that world. And on top of that, listening to and seeing different people. And then I started to hear other people talking about the same thing of going from this, whatever you want to call it, new age stuff, to going back to Jesus, so to speak. And so it was just like a confusing time for me. And I feel like, one of the most important things to know about this is that I definitely do not feel like the world of spirituality, and wherever that is for you, like it's not black or white. It's not either this or that. It's a whole spectrum. And I believe that because of the fact that it's a spectrum, like the divine truth is somewhere in the middle. It's not this and it's not that. And you have to think about how there's all these different religions all around the world. And at the end of the day, my conclusion is that there's so many different paths towards the same thing. And for whatever reason, souls choose certain paths to guide them back to themselves and back to the divine. And I feel like that's ultimately the goal, is that we are coming back to our true self, to our true self-expression, to back to love, and connecting back to the divine, whatever that might be for you, whether you call it God or you call it source or you call it creator or the universe or whatever else. Like, coming back to that bigger divine energy, to me, that's the most important thing. And I do believe that there's aspects on both sides, from the new age community and also from the more traditional biblical religious space, that pulls us away from the actual truth. I don't believe that God is judging us for connecting with divine beings of light and love. In fact, I believe that those beings were created to support us and for us to have this connection and to have this relationship, to be able to move towards the same divine vision, divine plan. And on the flip side, I do believe that in some circles of the new age communities, that some of that pulls you away from that God connection, which I believe is important. And sometimes, the new age stuff, I feel like it pulls you away from understanding how that relationship actually works and kind of pulls you more into like a self-centered experience versus understanding how it's all intertwined and all connected. So there's things on both sides that I feel pulls us away from the truth. And through my experience and through my own journey of like questioning my identity, like going as far as like questioning, like, am I supposed to be teaching about angels? Like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Like all these things that ultimately at the end of the day, I feel the truth is somewhere in between. And everyone has their own experiences of what spiritual truth means to them and what their own spiritual path means to them. And none of these are right or wrong or this or that. It's just whatever path your soul chose to take you on. And so for me personally, going through that experience, I knew at the end of the day, and I've always had this, like ever since I started my spiritual journey, I've always had this kind of like understanding or yearning or connection to something bigger, like God. For me, that's God. I've always called it God. I've never felt triggered by that word. But I know that some people do. And so that's, some people call it source or divine or whatever. And that's fine. To me personally, that has always been God. I've always, since the beginning, always like if I was kind of journaling to the divine, I would always say, dear God and angels. Like that was always my thing. I always did that. And so to me, going through that transition or that time period of like my identity crisis, I turned to that energy. And I felt like at some point throughout my journey, I had become a bit disconnected from God. And so I came back to that energy and kept asking and calling upon that divine presence and saying, like, what would you have me do? Like, how would you have me serve people? What is it that you would have me, how do you want me to show up in the world? Like, I am ready to do whatever you want me to do, basically. Like, just show me the way. And the thing that it all came back to was the angels. And so even though I had a period of time where I was thinking that I was moving away from the angels and like I kind of like felt like I was trying to distance myself from that and just move on to other like spiritual topics and truths and things like that, I kept being pulled back. It kept coming back. It was always about the angels. It's about the angels. And I kept being reminded of how that all happened to me, at the end of 2016, when I was in that meditation, in that journey. Archangel Raphael and Jophiel came in, told me this whole thing. Like all of that happened to me, where I went through that process where I was told and I was guided so deeply by the divine into my purpose as an angel channel and as a spiritual teacher and teaching about angels. Like it all kind of came back and I was like, remember that? Remember how it all started? Like, this is the thing. This is the thing. And to me, there's no separation or line between like, okay, if you're doing this, then you can't call on Jesus, or if you're calling on Jesus, then you can't call on the angels. Like there's no separation. And I feel like that's part of our human egos that are wanting to, for whatever reason, create these lines and create these rules around what it should be, and this is how it needs to be, and things like that. And what I've learned is that it's all interconnected. It's all interconnected. Some people call Jesus Yeshua. And that was something that also for me was like returning back to what is the origin of that connection, And again, you think about all the different religions across the world and how they have their own different stories and beliefs and things that they talk about with regards to divine beings and how they're here to support us. And you have to think like there's no one way. Like there's no one way. And I feel like sometimes those more religious or more traditional pathways kind of create these rules and or kind of maybe subtly create this idea that this is the only way. And that's where I think, going back to the comment that I received where it talked about, it would mean that any channeling is off the table and cards is off the table, because that's what the Bible says. Like, you're not allowed to channel, you're not allowed to use oracle card decks, that whatever, like all these things. And to me, that's just not the truth. And so that's why I was saying earlier how I feel like it's somewhere in the middle. Like there's parts from the Bible and from the traditional texts that I do believe are true and that I do believe are important and powerful and empowering. And at the same time, I feel like there's other stuff that isn't. And the same thing goes for the other side of the new age, where there's certain things and ideas that are like, yeah, like that's super empowering. And there's other things that I feel like takes us away from our true self. And so we have to understand that we are all human. And so no matter what perspective, no matter what truth, no matter what the thing is that we're sharing, there's going to be some tendency at some point or another, in some way or another, for a little bit of the ego to be weaved in and to create these rules and things like that. And so that's why I feel like it's a constant journey of learning and sometimes making mistakes and sometimes questioning things. But just because you're questioning things doesn't mean that you're on the wrong path or that you're doing something wrong. It just means that you are observing and you're curious, and there's nothing wrong with that, And so I feel like thinking back to, those testimonies of people saying that they, have so-called quit the new age and come back to Jesus and things like that. I feel like it's the reason why some people have experienced that is maybe because they have been burned by like the new age, whether it's because they weren't careful and they weren't cognizant of what they were doing. And so they may have connected with lower vibrational energies, or it could be that whatever experience, maybe it did cause them to veer too far off center in pursuit of something. Like their ego stepped in, they were in the pursuit of something, and that caused them to, experience whatever challenge or be burned in some way. So that might have been a thing. We can't obviously know everyone's personal experiences, but I do believe that might be a big thing for some people, and that's why they come back to this more traditional way of looking at spirituality. And I believe that for others, they're just simply exploring and they're moving over here and they're moving over there. And that's just where their journey takes them. And like I said at the beginning, I don't believe that there's one set journey. I believe that there's multiple truths for multiple people. And that I think ultimately at the end of the day, at least for me, it's about having an open mind. It's about, taking in and listening in what these different people from different backgrounds have to say, and just being so in tune with myself that I can tell when something resonates and that's a truth that feels right for me. And then I can also tell when that truth doesn't feel right for me. And it's like, no, that's not how it is, and it's just like, if you believe it, then that's fine, but it's just not for me. And I feel like that's ultimately at the end of the day what the journey is about. And so what I think is most important for all of us on this journey, whether you're new to spirituality, whether you've gone through this kind of like over here, like whatever your experience has been, I feel like at the end of the day, the most important part here is that we do need to establish a strong foundation and connection with the divine. Whatever that is for you, whether it's God, the universe, source, creator, etc., like whatever that is for you, I do believe that we need to have that strong foundation, because that is where the divine vision and the divine path comes from. It's from the energy that created you. So it is important to have a strong foundation connection with that specific energy. I do believe that it's also important to explore and discover your soul's truth. I feel like for us as divine beings, we are here to express ourselves. And also, as humans, we have conditioning that suppresses us expressing ourselves. So we're on a journey of deconditioning that and really coming back to our true self and how we're meant to express ourselves. I think that's the most important thing at the end of the day. I always talk about how your soul's purpose is to be your true self. So who is your true self? Like, that is the question. That is the journey that we are all on, is knowing our true self, remembering our true self, honoring our true self in whatever way that your soul wants to express itself. And then lastly, I believe that it is important to strengthen our connection to the divine beings that are here to guide us and to support us. I don't believe that they're here to necessarily give us answers in terms of who am I here to be, but I do believe that they guide us in terms of the healing, in terms of the energy, in terms of mirroring back to us what is that divine truth. So this is connecting with beings such as the archangels, your guardian angels, Jesus or Yeshua, the ascended masters, all of these divine beings that are here to support us and to guide us, and that are working from the highest good, from unconditional divine love. Like that, you can't go wrong when you are connecting to that energy and when that is your intention. And so I feel like it's understanding what the dynamic is supposed to be like versus just kind of, focusing on one thing or thinking that's only one specific way. It's understanding that there's a dynamic here. And I think at the end of the day, we can receive wisdom and insights from all the different religions and spiritual teachings and things out there that exist. And if anything ever is coming from a place of fear, coming from a place of ego control, like understanding like, oh, okay, that's probably not my truth. Like that seems like it was inserted there or whatever. And so coming back to whatever that truth is, I think is so powerful and so important. So I would love to hear from you in the comments below. I would love to hear if this is something that you've observed too, just on your spiritual journey of people kind of going through this transition, what your thoughts are, if you've kind of had an identity crisis going through this, whatever it is. I want to have an open conversation. So leave your comments below. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any other questions, then let me know. We could turn this into like a YouTube live stream and just have a more open dialogue and conversation around this if you guys want to do that. So let me know. And the last thing that I just want to share too is that, for me, my work and what I do with people, it's rooted in this foundation of, in that centered state, those aspects that I just shared of connecting, being connected to the divine, being connected to yourself, and working with the divine beings to support you on your journey. And I mean, you can't disregard all the testimonies of people who have been on that journey. And I think that about that for myself too, like all the things that I've been through and the major life changes that have happened in my life, because I lean into that, like you can't disregard that, and I think that's an important part of it too. And understanding that at the end of the day, I feel like we live in our true potential when we're following the path of our truth. And so that truth exists in many different ways. But I do have resources if you are wanting to be guided on your journey, if you're wanting to have that support around you, to have that mirror for yourself, to guide you, to support you, to help you know that you're not crazy, to help you to feel more empowered in your true self. I do have those things. Like that's the foundation of my work. So whether it's one-on-one coaching, which I have available at this time, which I'm so excited for, to be one-on-one guided throughout a whole journey to your soul's expansion, whether you are wanting to be a part of a community, a membership space where there's teachings, on-demand teachings, where we do meditations, we have conversations together, connection circles, all of that good stuff, or whether you are kind of on your own like DIY journey. I have a meditation library that can support you with that, with deepening your connection in that way. Whatever it is, I do have the resources. So I highly recommend that you go check those things out. And then, of course, I have the YouTube channel and the podcast that is now relaunched, which I'm so excited. So there's a lot available here for you to support you and guide you on your journey, depending on what you're desiring as support, level of support, depending on where you are, depending on how you like to approach things. So go check out all the details. All of that can be found in the description below this video. All the links to everything that I shared and just talked about, you can find it there. And if you ever have any questions, you can always reach out to me. So that is all that I wanted to share today. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this topic and this conversation. And yeah, I think this is an important conversation to have. So thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. I am sending you so much love, so many angel blessings, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.